From EPO to towel gates, fighters would do absolutely anything to have a weight advantage, even if it means coming ridiculously close to collapsing. MMA takes a weight cutting to a whole new level, and in this video, we're discussing the 7 most extreme weight cuts and gains in mixed martial arts history. Conor McGregor might be the best instance of the contrast between how fighters look before and after the weight cut. A fresh and healthy McGregor always looked like a skeleton every time he competed in the featherweight division. That being said, there was one particular event that really stood out. When McGregor was set to fight Dennis Siver, he weighed in at his required weight limit. Yet at the weigh-ins, his sunken and bony appearance garnered a ton of negative press afterwards, leaving fans concerned to see him like that. Nevertheless, he won the fight. Again, before his UFC 189 fight against Chad Mendes in 2015, the Notorious cut 27 pounds in 8 days from 172 pounds to the 145-pound featherweight limit. That was a total body weight loss of 15.69% in just 8 days. And at the weigh-ins, McGregor looked like Christian Bale in The Machinist.
145 for Mr. McGregor!
He beat Jose Aldo in his next fight, and vacated the flyweight belt never to return due to the extreme weight cuts. But while Conor made weight for his title fights, one fighter couldn't just afford the extra 1 pound demanded in championship fights. Yoel Romero is pound for pound one of the most jacked fighters in UFC history. The Cuban fighter is built like a tank. Amazingly, the Soldier of God has fought most of his career in middleweight. However, when not training for a fight, he weighed around 220 pounds, and he regularly cut between 30 to 40 pounds before every UFC fight. As he had very little body fat, most of the 30 to 40 pounds were lost as water weight in the 5 or 6 days before the weigh-in. Romero had a rough 2018 with regards to cutting weight. At UFC 221, he missed the 185-pound limit by 3 pounds, and even though he defeated middleweight champion Luke Rockhold, he was ineligible for the title. But because he won the fight and by way of convincing knockout, he was given a shot at Robert Whittaker for the real belt. History repeated itself later in the year at UFC 225, as Romero was overweight by a minuscule 0.2 pounds for his rematch with Whittaker. Again, before his UFC 248 fight against Israel Adesanya on March 7th of 2020, the Soldier of God told Ariel Helwani that he weighed 198 pounds. This left him with 13 pounds to cut in 3 days, which he successfully did. Nevertheless, even when he made weight, he looked absolutely drained in the process. Considering how much of a powerhouse he is physically, it is more surprising that he was able to make it to 185 pounds. He remains the only UFC fighter to miss weight in 2 UFC title fights. Despite being one of the greatest fighters to fight in the UFC, Khabib Nurmagomedov was a weight bully, cutting vast amounts of weight to make the lightweight limit. However, one time back in 2017, he almost became the first fighter to die from a weight cut. The Dagestani had been scheduled to fight Tony Ferguson no less than 5 times in the UFC, and every time it seemed likely to happen, an unfortunate event occurred on either side. However, the closest we came to seeing this fight was at UFC 209 back in 2017. Since he walked around at 190 pounds, Khabib had 35 pounds left to cut during fight camp. However, it was the hardest weight cut of Khabib's career. The fight was cancelled after Khabib was rushed to the hospital in the early morning, suffering from kidney pain, memory problems, and severe dehydration. I feel different. I never feel like this. One day before weigh-in, of course I don't feel good all the time, but I feel like this is something different.
I feel like different. I never feel like this. I think, wow,
Doctors said he almost died and was in intensive care for 5 days. The legend could have become the first UFC fatality. I know we all remember Tybau for his close fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov. However, even in that fight, his immense weight advantage could be seen. Well, Tybau was the record for the biggest weight cut in UFC history and was an absolute madman when it comes to weight cutting.
With it. That's why you see the swelling on the right eye of Rory McDonald.
Before his fight against Evan Dunman at UFC 156 in February of 2013, Gleison Tybau weighed 211 pounds at the start of his fight camp. Tybau had to lose 31.9% of his total body weight in the months leading up to this fight. But not just that, he had to lose 17 pounds on the day before the weigh-ins. Well, he made weight for the fight and gained back 27 pounds when he stepped in the octagon. But while he holds the record, the real king of weight cutting was Anthony Rumble Johnson. The late Anthony Rumble Johnson holds the UFC record for most divisions to compete in, having gone up almost 100 pounds. But how he did it will surprise you. His journey started years ago as an oversized welterweight. At a sculpted 6'2", he was absolutely massive for a welterweight and had to cut 40 pounds to get to that weight. Rumble made his UFC debut against Chad Rayner, and it took Johnson just 13 seconds to dispatch him. He fought 8 times at 170 pounds, and throughout the period, he was cutting from 210 pounds. At that weight class, Johnson was so shredded that he looked like a Greek god anytime he weighed in. However, he failed to make weight too many times. Half the time I didn't make it, other half I did. Even when I did make it, I felt like I was at death's door, at the steps of death to croak. But I'm glad I didn't take any serious damage while cutting weight because I was dropping from 210 to 170, which is 40 pounds, and most people can't do 10.
Half the time I didn't make it, and half the time I did, and even when I did make it, I felt like...
His most insane transformation was in the 2 months before his UFC FN24 bout against Dan Hardy in March of 2011. Before accepting the fight against Hardy, he just finished recovering from a knee surgery that had him left weighing a massive 230 pounds, so he cut an incredible 59 pounds in just 2 months. While Johnson was phenomenal at 170 pounds with devastating knockout power, the weight cut wasn't worth the results as he lost 2 and won 6. He would move up to 185 pounds but would still miss weight at that division. His consistent weight misses annoyed the UFC brass and Rumble got cut from the UFC. Not long after, however, a determined Anthony Johnson reinvented himself, coming back a light heavyweight, and he embarked on an incredible run. Johnson left the UFC after a failed title attempt at Daniel Cormier's belt. However, in that fight, DC had the hardest weight cut of his life. Throughout his stellar career, DC never missed weight. However, when he did, it resulted in perhaps the biggest weight cut controversy in UFC history. At the weigh-ins of his title defense against Anthony Johnson, Cormier tipped the scales at 1.2 pounds over the light heavyweight limit. This was the hardest one by far. I think the beginning of my 205-pound career was easier because I was fighting so often. Just minutes later, the light heavyweight champion gripped the privacy towels with both hands while he successfully made the 205-pound limit. Cormier had utilized an old weigh-in trick by using the towels to shift his weight and fool the scale. Well, he was not caught, and he went on to win the fight against Anthony Johnson. However, in TJ Dillashaw's case, it completely backfired. When he signed the contract to meet Henry Cejudo at flyweight, Dillashaw weighed 155 pounds and had an 8% body fat. The man was already ripped, and it looked like there wasn't much room for him to go lower. Well, TJ pulled it off. With the use of supplements and the most extreme techniques, Dillashaw was able to make weight but looked sick standing on the scale. I'm ready for the weigh-ins. I feel good. The weight is good, and the weight cut is going better than I expected.
Come on, man, I'm ready. I'm ready for weigh-ins. I feel good. The energy levels are great. My weight's on.
It was, however, weird to see him standing there looking like a zombie during the weigh-ins. All of a sudden, it became news that TJ had tested positive for EPO. He was suspended by the USADA for 2 years and had used the substance during his weight cut. But even with the substance, he got KO'd by Cejudo within the first minute of their fight. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and leave a comment down below.